Hello everyone. For today's video, I wrote a short story about the day that Tom Riddle discovered the Chamber of Secrets. Our story begins in Tom's third year, when he's on his first trip to Hogsmeade with a few of his future Death Eater cronies. I hope you all enjoy the story, and let's get started. The crisp fall air bit at the Slytherin boys' heels as they made their way up the path to Hogsmeade. One of the boys was talking very animatedly, as two of the others laughed at every word he said. However, the boy on the far right walked silently along, ignoring the others so thoroughly it was as if they did not exist. He was tall, handsome, and even though he was clearly younger than the other three, he had an air about him that made it obvious that he was the leader of the bunch.
"And you should have heard her screaming," cackled one of the boys, "crying out for her mummy the whole time. The stupid little jumped-up mudblood."
The other boys roared with laughter, but went instantly silent as the handsome boy spoke for the first time. Oh yes, Avery. A truly inspiring story. And why don't you tell Dolohov and Lestrange where you'd be right now if it wasn't for me? The boy named Avery's smile faltered at once as he began to speak.
"Well, yeah, of course, Tom. If it hadn't been for you, I'd be sitting in a cell in Azkaban."
Tom finished Avery's sentence with a cold fury. You see, boys, continued Tom, Avery thought it would be funny to practice the Cruciatus curse on a first year, right where anyone could have seen. And what do you know? Professor Dibbit shows up within 5 minutes. And just when he was about to cart Avery off to Azkaban for the rest of his miserable life, I happened to be coming around the corner. And tell them what happened next, Avery, commanded Tom with a look of disgust. Avery, who looked like his soul had already been sucked out of his body, stuttered through the rest of his story.
Well, you put a memory charm on Professor Dibbit, and then used the Imperius curse to make him go back to his office. And then you went up to the Mudblood girl and told her to stop crying. Then you asked her what her name was. And when she told you, you said, "Myrtle, you are safe for now, but I will kill you and every one of your kind one day." And then you modified her memory as well.
That's right, whispered Tom in a low hiss. And maybe, if you hadn't been such a substandard wizard, you could have done this yourself. Or maybe that's just the way you like it, Avery. A 7th year, relying on a 3rd year to bail him out of trouble. Pathetic. And the last word seemed to linger on long after Tom stopped speaking. Riddle let the silence waft over the boys for a moment, but then he broke it with a kinder, more gentle voice. But no doubt you have learned your lesson, Avery. No more stepping out of line unless it's at my command, correct?
Yes, of course, Tom,
stuttered Avery. Well then, boys, said Tom enthusiastically, what do you say we enjoy this lovely trip to Hogsmeade? After all, it is my first time. The 3 boys gave each other the look that you give your siblings when one of your parents yells at the oldest child, and then they carried on down the path as though nothing had happened. Then, about a mile further up the road, something strange occurred. From the forest to their left, Tom began to hear voices. At first, he thought it might just be the wind blowing through the trees, but as he stopped to listen, he clearly heard a single word being repeated through the air.
"Tom," said Dolohov, "why have you stopped?"
Tom quickly came out of his trance and turned to look at the boys. It's nothing, he said. Stomachache. You 3 go ahead without me. I'm going back to the castle to have Madame Pomfrey take a look at me.
What? Are you serious? Said Dolohov. But this is your first time going to Hogsmeade, and I thought we were gonna... Go! Said Tom more forcefully.
The 3 boys looked frightened and obeyed Tom at once. This was clearly not the first time they had been given a command by him. As Tom watched the 3 boys disappear down the lane, he did not turn back towards Hogwarts. Instead, he hopped over the stone wall to his left and headed toward the whispers coming through the trees. Tom walked through the forest for a full half hour before the reason for the voices became apparent. In a clearing large enough to fit the entire Hogwarts student body, there were about 50 serpents circling each other. They seemed to be waiting for his arrival, because as soon as he stepped into the clearing, they began to form a line, one by one, as they slithered east towards the mountains in the distance. He followed, not knowing exactly where the final destination was, but he was filled with that same hunger and excitement that he had on the day that he first discovered he was a wizard. He had always felt that he was destined for greatness and was somehow different from everyone else, and today he sensed that destiny was once again calling his name. After what seemed like hours, the serpents finally reached the foot of the mountain, and then suddenly they scattered in all directions. "Where are you going?" Tom yelled in Parseltongue, but the snakes ignored him so completely it was as if he wasn't even there. They slithered back into the trees, and within seconds, Tom was alone, miles away from Hogwarts, Hogsmeade, and he had no idea how to get back to either. He swore and kicked the side of the mountain. The rage he had always made sure to keep below the surface seemed to boil over inside of him. He pulled out his wand and was about to blow a crater into the mountain when he saw an engraving on the rock face. He lowered his wand and began to walk slowly toward the mountain. As he looked closer, he saw that there were 2 intertwined serpents engraved into the rock face. His rage turned to excitement as his mind began to race. Was this it? Was this where he would finally learn his true parentage? Learn why he was the only person he knew that could talk to snakes? Was this the proof of his theory, that he was descended from the great and noble Salazar Slytherin? His hands were shaking, and he did not know how he knew to do it, but his mouth seemed to be working of its own accord as he hissed, "Open!" in Parseltongue. The engraved serpents parted as the rock face split open and created a tunnel just large enough for one person to fit through. Riddle walked into the newly formed cave, and he did not even need to light his wand, for the 2 serpents that had sat on the side of the mountain guided him through the tunnel, their emerald eyes glowing like flashlights. As he made his way through the tunnel, he gazed at the walls around him, which were covered in artwork. However, he could barely make out what the drawings were because the serpents were moving so fast. Then suddenly, he came to the end of the tunnel and stepped into a large, empty room. Exactly how big, he couldn't tell, because as soon as he stepped foot inside, the serpents turned around and made their way back toward the tunnel entrance. He took out his wand and whispered, "Lumos," but nothing happened. Slightly annoyed, he put his wand away and searched around for a source of light. He saw that there was a tiny candle to his left, with an unlit torch above. He picked up the candle and held it to the torch. Immediately, green flames erupted from torches all around the room. He spun around and saw a giant statue of a man with a serpent around his shoulders and his right hand held out. In the palm of his hand lay a tightly rolled scroll of parchment. With a rush of excitement, Tom made his way across the room, almost tripping over his own feet. As he reached the statue, he opened up the scroll with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, written in what looked like blood. Tom's eyes were drawn to the top of the scroll as he began to read the first line aloud. "To my heir." Thank you all so much for watching the video, and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, I'd really appreciate if you hit the like and subscribe buttons. Also, this is just part 1 to the story, so if you'd like to see a part 2, let me know in the comment section below. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.